Okay, this is a second recording. This one is actually the learning block itself. Now, for those of you who came along Thursday night after the away day, I showed you a learning block where I had it set out on A3, and it looked in a format, it looked like there were post-it notes. I think there's problems with doing that, it just didn't quite work properly. So what I've done is I've used this template and format, and I've developed the learning block in like a Word file. And the idea is that I'd like everyone to develop some kind of learning block on the themes they want to have for the field review and bring these along on the 10th of September. So let's have a look at a learning block. This is based on the theory that was discussed in the first sort of like screencast. Now it's actually in practice. So you can see that this learning block is in the subject theme of management. Now it could be that some of the learning blocks have more than one subject theme, but I've got in here the learning block theme of management, and the learning block is about procurement, but it's about the procurement of services and works. And then what we've got is, I've looked at the infinity model, because if we're going to use the infinity model to underpin what we're going to do in our particular course review, then I think that all of what we're going to produce has to in some way look at the infinity model. Okay, and what we've got here is that in fact here we look at the implementation early on in the implementation of the project. So even pre-project delivery, when we're starting to think about things, so in fact it actually takes place at the inception of a project, this particular learning block. In fact, what it covers is the project delivery, so in fact how you build a thing, and the performance of the project, the asset performance that goes on, right, post-construction. So this particular learning block covers those two aspects of it, but it takes place at the inception, at the very, very beginning of the inception of a project. It is a level 6. I've got it down as level 6. When we have a conversation and we look at these on the 10th of September, we might think that this is not a Learning 6.1, but I'm happy to leave it as a Learning 6.1 now. I'm going to have to drop the size of this screen because we can't see it all in one go. Okay, so what we've got here is that there's an expectation when we talk about learning outcomes. So prior cognitive acquisition, right, for a level 6.1 there's got to be things like problem solving, undertaking research to support propositions and solutions, collect and synthesize information to inform solutions. This is not a definitive list. Okay, this is just a series of things that could be there. Again, on the 10th of September we will expand these out, but I've put these in to look at them. So you may want to think about what you're looking for at level 5s. You may want to expand them out for everyone that's doing level 6 and even level 4s. What the expectation is that the student will have before starting this particular model in terms of their cognitive development. Now in itself we've got the cognitive development. Now what I've done is I've broken it down into 3 main themes: analysis, synthesis, evaluation and technical. Now you can go through and read these yourself, but basically, right, this one here, number 1, number 2 and number 3 are all deal with at the intellectual development of the student in terms of their cognitive knowledge and understanding, the lifelong learning, the idea of assessment for learning. So I'm looking at these things happening here. So if you remember the 3 pillars we had cognitive development, assessment and subject content. Well, basically, and I said there's an emphasis away from the actual NVQ level. This is what makes a student, right, in higher education, a student in higher education, this ability to develop these 3 areas: analysis, synthesis and evaluation. The last one here talks about the subject content itself, the catalyst. They also have an understanding and knowledge of the subject. So here you're developing the person in the sense of their cognitive development, and here you're developing their technical knowledge around the subject. So I've broken it down into those 4 main areas, and that's the way that's done. Now the other one is, and again, for those of you who couldn't for whatever reason come along in June to the 2-day workshop, one of the things that we were presented with there was this idea of these principles of graduate attributes. Now I'm going to ask Sybil for a copy of these electronically. I had a copy today, someone gave me a copy, and what I've done now is I've looked at the areas above this cognitive development, and I've put them down, and I've benchmarked them, if you like, against the graduate attributes. And basically one of the graduate attributes is critical and creative thinking, 1, 2, and I think there are 3, and I've said that the first one relates to critical and creative thinking, right? The first one of these. The next one is literate and effective communication, entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. It hasn't covered all of the attributes, the graduate attributes. I think, though, for this particular learning block, it's covered these particular ones, and we could expand that out to cover more. I don't think any one particular learning block covers them, but if you go back and look at the idea of graduate attributes and the PowerPoint that Sybil gave us on that day, you can see there that these fairly well match, right? I think these particular areas of entrepreneurship, right, literate and effective communicator, etc., etc. So I've put them against that. So we've now benchmarked it against that. Again, I've said assessment is individual assessment within a scenario-based group framework. Now I'm going to expand this out, but this is just here as an example, because I think what I'm looking for is this idea of the learning community, which is the group framework, but it's individual assessment. And I've just about worked out a framework of how I can do an individual assessment within a group framework, right? And more importantly, because we have to develop 2 things here. One is assessment that is for the individual. So because the students don't mind working in groups, it's the assessment they don't like very much when it's a bit for everybody. So I think I've worked that one out, but what we want to do is we want to develop this learning community, which Tony was talking about the other day, this idea of learning community, and you get that from this idea of them working together to develop a theme or a project or a series of projects, because that's the principle of what we're doing. Again, I'm not a big fan, as I discussed the other day, of this idea of knowledge acquisition and then regurgitation. Right? I think one of the things, if I'm going to do an examination that's level 6, I'm more interested in open book, because basically it's not about the knowledge, right? It's more about the way they manipulate the knowledge and the subject content to come to a conclusion. And I think they're level 6 attributes. So I think that one of the things we might want to start thinking about is how we use more open book examinations. That also goes for in-class test. But I think I'm going to have to expand this out a little bit more as well. The other thing I've put down in this particular learning block is that I think mode of delivery. Well, I like the idea of inquiry-based learning. I've done quite a bit of stuff on that. I like the idea of the learning community, and I think that should be encouraged right the way through the whole of the course. I think the idea of some kind, well, I'm a big fan of the idea of recording what I'm doing and letting it go out to the net. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm not saying that everyone has to do this, but I like the idea, if we're going to get into a position where we want to widen our client base, or be more, how can I put it, be more aware of what our clients require in terms of, not clients, our students require in terms of their learning, yeah? So I like the idea of doing some formal lectures, but keeping these and broadcast them on a synchronous node, so in real time, but also then have them in asynchronous node, so people can actually look at them at a later date. Now, whether they do it or not is irrelevant. It's there for them to do, and I like that idea. I like the idea of group workshops, because then it also reinforces this idea of the learning community. I mean, this synchronized and asynchronized mode also keeps the learning community developing. Guest speakers, tutorials, discussion boards. I could even put in their site visits. And then what I've got here is subject content, and then I've got prior subject acquisition. What I expect them to come in with before we start. Now, it doesn't mean to say they can't do the module. It's not a prerequisite to a module or anything of this subject, but what it does say is you really need to know about these things to do this particular learning block of material, or this module as it will be. And I think that's quite important, so they understand what they're coming into, and it also helps us signpost it forward and backwards, because I'm going to start looking now for where is this in the other learning blocks. And of course, these learning blocks then maybe fit together to make a module with some of these things in anyway. But that's something for us to decide. So you have to look at what you expect from where they're coming from. There will also be a signpost forward, but these are only for level 4 and level 5 modules, and this one's a level 6 module. And then I've got down here, right, content. Now it's not been completed. Right? I've just put some stuff in as content of the things I think will be in a module like this, right? And I've got signposted then to learning blocks. So where does this going to go? Does it finish? And if it does, should we have it? But it only applies to level 4 and level 5 modules. So a level 4 module might be looking at this goes into a level 5 module here, right? And the level 5 module will look back, and then it might go into level 6 in the other direction. I think the modules in all cases should relate to what we're doing. Okay, so that's what a learning block looks like of what I put together. I would like everyone to produce learning blocks around their subject areas based on the themes that we've indicated and the subjects which were in the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, and I like all these done for the 10th of September. If you can't make the 10th of September, can you send me over your learning blocks in this format? I've attached this format to the I've attached this particular file to the email, so you can take it away and then you can type over it, take the bits out and then carry on, so we have a consistent format for our learning blocks. Cheers.